many of our people who are thinking more deeply and more broadly, looking at it as it actually is, and are beginning to see it more in the international context and the relation that it has with the African struggle, a human rights struggle, or the struggle for human rights. And as such, we can then take it into the United Nations
and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahama, is condemning the death of a black American man, George Floyd, at the hands of police in the United States. The AUC chair issued a statement voicing the condemnation of violence, rejection of discrimination, and called on Washington to intensify action. According to him, the U.S. must increase efforts to eliminate forms of ethnic and racial discrimination. He said the AU rejected ongoing discriminatory practices against black citizens of the U.S. George Floyd, 46, died in police custody last week. The incident whipped up the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement, especially after the viral video of a white police officer filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck as he repeatedly said he could not breathe.
Hello family, this is Tierney Cherie from We Trash Colonialism. We Trash Colonialism, we are an organization of people who are of African descent in the United States who are seeking recognition that the United States government is colonizing people of African descent. This video is going to be an invite video. We've done a lot of initiatives as an organization, and typically one way that we invite people to join in with different initiatives is to join We Trash Colonialism, become a member, or just become a supporter, and in that way you can actually participate in whatever we're doing. This is something that is more so an invite to people who are in organizations, and so the way to essentially participate would be to join an African organization or to possibly join We Trash Colonialism if you feel that our principles and our goals align with your philosophy. There's a lot going on in the United States right now, and more now than ever, it's really calling us to really ask serious questions about what level of commitment we have to this idea of Americanism, and to what degree we should really think and contemplate our African identity as a sense of liberation, as opposed to liberation through the channels of government and institutions that have historically and presently have been used to oppress our people. Now, there's a brother in our organization, many of you probably have heard from him, Brother Kanata, and he brought up a good point a couple weeks ago. He said, you know, we should really focus on what we could do to connect with the African Union. Now, if you don't know the African Union, it's basically a kind of like the European Union. It was originally the Organization of African Unity that was formed, spearheaded really by Kwame Nkrumah. It was intended to be a Pan-Africanist organization, and this organization basically became the African Union, which is basically you have different member states of the African Union. They all come together under one banner in the African Union. So similar to like what happened with the European Union. I think what's different about the African Union as opposed to the European Union, number one, is understanding that the origins of the African Union really originated in a Pan-Africanist mindset. It was a reaction to colonialism. The colonizing powers were still very much in control of certain parts of Africa, and the idea to unite was an idea to make the continent more resistant to colonialism. Now, of course, colonialism doesn't just happen on a continent. Colonialism is international, because not just us who were on the continent of Africa, but us Africans who were taken from the continent and put through slavery, whether it be in the United States or it be in Haiti, whether it be in Jamaica, whether it be in Europe. We also were people who were and are victimized by colonialism. So the spirit and the nature of decolonization is not just pertinent to the African continent. African decolonization is not just pertinent to the African continent. It's pertinent to all of us throughout the diaspora. Now, many of you probably also know that in the African Union, they have an initiative, or rather a recognition, called the Sixth Region. There are 5 regions of Africa where member states can have participation in the African Union, and then they come up with this concept of a 6th region. The 6th region being Africans who are in the diaspora. That we also are a part of what is happening in the African Union. Now, quick, just to say, I already know what a lot of you are probably thinking. The African Union obviously has a lot of problems. It obviously has a lot of colonization still present. It has a lot of outside influence, and it is in no way a perfect body. So that's not the proposal that we're putting forward, that this is going to be the win all be all. We're going to become part of the African Union, and that's going to erase our problems. We struggle, and we struggle continually. We understand that liberation is not something that is won in one battle, but it is won in a war for your ultimate freedom. But when you consider what's going on right now in reaction to the horrible murder, lynching of George Floyd, what we see is that there is international recognition of the fact that Africans in the United States have been facing a oppressive system that is fundamentally racist to the very bone. And that the system is not just one that has been abolished. It's not one that has gone away. It's only transformed and become what it is today. When you consider the prison industrial complex, when you consider the welfare state, when you consider so many institutions in the United States, they really all function together for the oppression of Black people. We have a lot of people who are talking about symbolic gestures, saying let's take down the Confederate flag, let's take down the Confederate statues, let's stop using this racist, theme inside of our songs or whatever. A lot of people are talking about symbolic gestures, but we are talking about systemic gestures. If you're really talking seriously about eradicating racism, then you necessarily have to talk about the systems of racism that actually have us in the position that we are in. As the ancestor, Sylvie Carmichael or Kwame Ture, said, our problem is not that there are people who want to lynch us. The problem is that there are people who have the power to lynch us. So it's not just a matter of, we have to, eradicate racism, or we have to get rid of, hatred of Black people. We are in a position of being vulnerable, and we are literally sitting ducks inside of a water full of sharks. That is the problem. I don't care about if you train these sharks to no longer want to eat duck. I don't care if you train them to only eat fish. If you train them to be vegetarians, I don't care about that. I care about my position in this place, being completely vulnerable and being completely at the will of those who have been adverse to me historically. And some would say it's in the DNA of this country to be adverse to us. So that's what we're talking about when we say systemic change, when we say power. We don't want to just have a recognition that Black Lives Matter. We want to have the obtaining of Black power. That is what is more significant. That is what is truly significant. Symbolic gestures, symbolism, it goes away. It fades away. But institutional change, that is what we're looking for. And so when we say that we need recognition of our plight on an international scale, we're not saying that we just need people to feel bad for us. We're saying that we need actual moves to be done. So, anyways, as I said, Brother Kanata from We Charge Colonialism, he had the idea that Africans in the United States, we should really consider obtaining recognition in the African Union as part of the 6th region as a member state. Now, some of you may be aware, there was actually a recent story where Haiti was trying to become a full member of the African Union, and the African Union rejected them because they're not a continental African country. But Haiti does have an observer status in the African Union. However, I think that if we're talking about political struggles, I I think this is something worth struggling for. I think this is something worth fighting for. Not just Haiti, but Africans in America, Africans throughout the world, that we understand that the spirit of the African Union is not the spirit of the European Union, where, you know, you have to be from Europe to actually be recognized. The spirit of the African Union was formed, again, out of the Organization of African Unity, which was a decolonization organization. And any recognition of African people in the diaspora has to take into consideration the fact that we've all been colonized by the same system that colonized Africa, and any rejection of our right to have our grievances heard, to be considered full members of that struggle, is just a rejection of history. It's a rejection of reality. It's a rejection of full recognition of the system of white supremacy. So all that to say, so we are trying to form a coalition of Pan-Africanist organizations based in the United States, and we encourage other Pan-African or other states and people of African descent to also organize similarly. So when we say a coalition of people of African descent in the United States, a Pan-Africanist organization who recognizes, because not every single organization that is with African people recognizes this, but recognizes that we are a part of the African struggle internationally. But we are strictly coming together for the purpose of obtaining recognition. So similar to nationhood, when you have a recognition of yourselves with an identity, a common identity, we are seeking a coalition of Pan-Africanist organizations to actually have that type of bearing, have that type of authority, to say that we are representatives of the people who identify themselves as African in the United States. So essentially, we are inviting people. We're inviting organizations. And that's why I said, if you're not part of an organization, this is the type of thing that we need you to join an organization to be a part of. We're inviting Pan-Africanist organizations to join this coalition. And essentially, we're going to try to come up with the proper means to organize a petition to the African Union, and a petition that is basically going to say that we are a part of your struggle. We are a part of the struggle for decolonization of African people. You have recognized this so far by making it clear that you see the diaspora as a sixth region. There's been many recent instances inside of on the continent of Africa that shows that there's a recognition that we are a part of your struggle. So us being a part of your struggle, us being a people in the United States with a common identity, that we are petitioning and we are even demanding that we have a voice inside of this outside organization, outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, one that has authority over African people. And from there we can talk about what type of gains what we expect, whether that be actual plans of repatriation for people of African descent who are seeking to escape the hell that we've been facing here, whether we are thinking of backing as far as calling out the many crimes that against humanity that have happened against African people in the United States, whatever type of protections and privileges that we will be afforded as members of the African Union. Those are the things that we'd be demanding. So again, this is just an invite. If you're a part of a Pan-Africanist organization, please you can hit us up at WeChargeColonialism@gmail.com. We're trying to get this started. We're trying to get it started soon, especially with everything that's going on in regard to people looking for answers, people looking for strategy, and people looking for something to do. Because it's very clear from what's going on that the typical way of just waiting on the Democrats or the Republicans to battle it out is not going to do anything for us. It hasn't done anything for us, and it's time for us to think outside of the box and actually think of meaningful ways that we can reverse this trend of us being victims and instead be in a position where we could be in power. So that's all I have for this video. Again, please hit us up, WeChargeColonialism@gmail.com. I will see you guys in the next video.